Good morning. Welcome to the Board of Supervisors meeting here for Calaveras County. At this time, is there any public comment? Seeing none, Madam Clerk.
Closed session agenda. Item 1, pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6, personnel matter, conference with labor negotiator Judy Hawkins, Director of Human Resources and Risk Management, regarding Deputy Sheriff's Association, Sheriff's Management Unit, Service Employees International Union, and Calaveras County Public Safety Employees Association negotiations.
Any public comment on the closed session item? Seeing none, Madam Clerk.
Item 2, public employment, pursuant to Government Code Section 54957B1, Economic Development Director. The Board will convene to close session regarding Item 2 at approximately 11 a.m. and return after the lunch break at approximately 1:30 p.m.
Public comment on Item 2 of the closed session agenda. Seeing none, Madam Clerk.
Item 3, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation, one case pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9D2.
Any public comment on Item 3 of the closed session agenda? Seeing none, at this time we will adjourn to closed session. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Board of Supervisors meeting for Tuesday. This will be our open session. At this time, would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Supervisor Garmendi, would you read this, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk.
Report of closed session. Pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6, personnel matter, conference with labor negotiator Judy Hawkins, Director of Human Resources and Risk Management, regarding Deputy Sheriff's Association, Sheriff's Management Unit, Service Employees International Union, and Calaveras County Public Safety Employees Association negotiations. There was no reportable action taken. Item 2 will be held during the lunch break from approximately 11 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. Item 3, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation, one case, pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9D2. There was no reportable action taken.
Thank you. Is there any announcements by the Board of Directors or staff?
Yes, Chair, I have one.
Supervisor Mills.
Good morning. Just so everyone is aware, Mark Twain Healthcare District is renegotiating their 30-year contract for the operations of the hospital and the ancillary pieces. They had a meeting last night that we did have public members, and if anyone is interested, they have another meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning at 7:30 at the library. I would suggest very strongly, if you're going to be voting on this issue, that you need to be aware of what it is, the ramifications of it, because it will have a direct financial impact to that district for whatever decision they make. So it's just an opportunity for the voters to become aware of what that is. Health service is a critical need, critical care need in Calaveras County, and I would encourage everyone to just be involved in that piece. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Mills. Madam Clerk, could you briefly cover our schedule today as far as time-wise? I know we have a closed session scheduled for lunch.
So my understanding would be that we will proceed with today's agenda until the 11 o'clock hour, and close thereto we would adjourn to closed session for the board to hear item 2, and then reconvene at approximately 1:30 if there is further business to discuss. but to report out as well.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Ladies and gentlemen, I just became aware of one of our county employees that was gravely ill last night. Our hearts go out to him and his family and wish for a speedy recovery. We'll not identify the employee due to HEPA loss, but the bottom line is he's one of our family. At that point, Madam Clerk.
We will go to public comment. Any item of interest to the public that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board and is not posted on the consent or regular agendas may be addressed during the public comment period. California law prohibits the board from taking action on any matter which is not posted on the agenda unless it is determined to be an emergency by the Board of Supervisors. If public comment is completed before the 30-minute allotted time period, the board may immediately move to the next order of business. If public comment is not completed during the allotted time period, it will be continued as the last item of business in order to provide an opportunity for the remainder of comments to be heard.
Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, public comment is open. Mr. Fry, good morning.
Good morning, Chairman, Calaveras, and members of the Board of Supervisors. I'd kind of like to piggyback on what Supervisor Mills was talking about earlier with regard to the Mark Twain Healthcare District and Dignity, which Dignity has made a proposal, and the district and Dignity have been going back and forth the last couple of years. And there's a couple of things I'd like to point out. One of them is that Mark Twain is one of the top 21 rural hospitals nationally for 2016 for quality and patient safety. Also would like to share with the public on TV that $36 million has been given by Dignity Health in the year 2016 for grants and other things in the community. I would like once again to reiterate that Mark Twain Healthcare District does not run the hospital. Dignity Healthcare runs the hospital, and the healthcare district has a person on the public board to give input. So with that, the hospital is the people in the hospital are the people that run in the executive board of Mark Twain Dignity Health are the people that run the hospital. I attended the meeting last week. There are let me get to that page. The presenters last week, again last night, and tomorrow morning are Carl Silberstein, who's the Senior Vice President of Financial Operations for Dignity Health. Gary Spa is semi-retired, and he was a Dignity Health executive. And Bob Deal is the President and CEO of Mark Twain Medical Center. So I just hope people get out and find out what's going on with Dignity.
Thank you, Mr. Fry. Next speaker. Mr. Segala, good morning.
Good morning. Two items. One of them is repealing the gas tax. We have petitions that anybody can use. I have several of them here. And also they can be downloaded from the website reformcalifornia.org. And the petitions call for repealing the SB1, and also future increases in gas tax will be required to have public approval. And I think this really makes sense. We hope to be able to have petition tables at the shopping centers if we have enough volunteers. And now the other item is there is a problem in our water districts, CCWD, in finances. They run out of money. And they have not identified the amount of possible increase in rates yet, but their leadership will be at our taxpayer meeting tomorrow at 11:30 at the library. If anyone wants to attend that meeting, they need to call me because we have limited seating. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Further public comment? Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Board, staff. My name is Mary Ellen Souza. I've been before you in the past, but today I'm wearing a little different hat. I'm here today as a co-founder and director of an organization called Creative Support Alternatives. I've passed around a packet for each of you. It has our organization's brochure, a couple of recent newsletters, and just a little bit about who we are and what we do. This is our 25th year, and we provide independent living services for adults with intellectual disabilities and developmental disabilities. And so to decipher that a bit, intellectual disabilities, developmental disabilities include things such as disabilities such as epilepsy, cognitive disabilities, which used to be known as mental retardation. It's not a term we use anymore. Might include cerebral palsy, other neurological disorders, and a variety of other disabilities. Some of those folks also may have a dual diagnosis, so they have not only a developmental disability, but may experience mental health issues as well. The independent living services part, what we do is assist individuals to access affordable housing. We assist them to get out on their own and live as independently as possible with supports in place, short-term or long-term, depending on what their needs are. We assist them to access health care and provide advocacy support in making sure that health care professionals are speaking in a way that the folks we serve can understand. We help them to ask questions and assume as much responsibility for themselves as independent adults as possible. We also connect them to other community resources, educational opportunities, employment opportunities, and in short, work really hard to ensure that the adults with developmental disabilities in our community are responsible, contributing citizens. They are also your constituents. They might also be your family members, your neighbors, your coworkers, your fellow church members. Part of doing what we do involves a lot of teaching and facilitating and connecting. It also involves some cheerleading occasionally. Not everyone that we serve has had the benefit of families wrapped around them, supporting them and guiding them. And so sometimes we step into the role of filling in some of those gaps as well. I mentioned earlier it was our 25th year. I started the organization in San Diego under the San Diego State University Research Foundation umbrella in 1992. When I moved up here and became an immediate permanent resident of Calaveras County, I live in Mountain Ranch, we began providing services here in 2007. So it's our 25th year overall, our 10th year here. My very able San Diego team runs it down there. I'm down there periodically, but my heart and soul and energy is here. I know I just have a quick minute, but I encourage you to take a look at our newsletters. They're written in plain language intentionally, so all folks can understand it. If you have any questions about folks in your district who might need services, we're funded through the Department of Developmental Services Development Act. Thank you.
Further public comment, speakers?
Good morning.
Morning.
I listen to the radio occasionally, and I I heard on the radio about a new book, and it's called Drugs as Weapons Against Us. And these are my own words, it's my conclusions of what the author said, but maybe not his conclusions. The use of drugs and hypnosis as a way to train assassins who are then programmed to kill. And that also refers to some of the horrible things that happen in this world. People doing things, they're programmed. And one person that we were talking about marijuana, and he said, it expands your mind, ma'am. And I'm going, that's the problem, is that it reduces your inhibitions so that you're willing to do things that you otherwise wouldn't do. The use of drugs to make people less competent and easier to manipulate. The use of drugs to turn veterans and others into vegetables. If they use drugs, they must also give up their guns. The use of drugs to turn us into sheep, to be herded and sorted into pens. Who would have thought that a country founded on freedom and its ideals would give that up for a toke? Thank you.
Thank you. Further speaker? Good morning, Bonnie.
Good morning, Board. Bonnie Newman from Double Springs. As much as I'd like to give you a wonderful Christmas story from Double Springs, I'm going to continue the topic I started last week on sexual misconduct. I looked up a word called epilogue that means a closing section added to a novel, play, etc., providing further comment, interpretation, or information. So I'm going to add an epilogue to my Me Too story from last week. If you recall, I spoke of being accosted in the bathroom over there by a county employee, and how it was handled then was to separate the team and give us individual buildings. This was my building, by the way. I didn't address the issue at the time. Neither did my supervisors address the issue at the time. It was kind of swept under the rug, but interestingly enough, I stayed as a janitor for 4.5 years, and the other employee was canned in a few months for misusing county property. So I just think that's kind of ironic. Or maybe it was unauthorized use of county property. I'm not sure what the term was. But anyway, that was 40 years ago. We didn't have a policy. There was no Judy Hawkins then. And I think we've made some incredible progress in Calaveras County. But as a nation, I think we've taken a road of shame. It's true, times have changed somewhat, at least the issues being talked about, but the basic problem is, when you want to get down to it, abusers don't view their behavior as abuse. They consider it as maybe flirting or being friendly, or they don't have empathy. They don't put the shoe on the other foot. What we see is a lot of victim blaming when this situation happens. Something the woman did, or she's a liar. And often we hear a lot of excuses, like, boys will be boys. We hear that all the time to excuse obnoxious behavior. Well, boys may be boys, but pigs will be pigs, and once you distinguish yourself as a pig, there's almost no chance of shedding that moniker because you're outed. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Newman. Further public comments? Seeing none, Madam Clerk.
Consent agenda. Consent agenda items are expected to be routine and non-controversial. They will be acted upon by the board at one time without discussion. Any board member, staff member, or interested party may request removal of an item from the consent agenda for later discussion.
Is there any member of the public desiring to pull an item from the consent agenda? Seeing none, any member of the Board of Supervisors or staff desire to pull an item from the consent agenda?
Item 9.
Item 9 by Supervisor Mills. Any further items? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
I would move the remainder of the consent agenda, Mr. Chair.
It's been moved by Supervisor Toffenelli to accept the remainder of the consent agenda. Second?
Second.
Second by Supervisor Mills. Public comment? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed indicate by saying no. Hearing none, motion carries 5-0, unanimous. Supervisor Mills, item 9.
Item
Madam
9,
Clerk?
it's from the Sheriff's Office to accept State of California Parks and Recreation Boating and Waterways Division Law Enforcement Marine Equipment Grant in the amount of $127,000 and authorize the sheriff to sign the grant. Authorize the transfer of $8,514 from Sheriff AB 443 Funds 101-00326 to Marine Safety Fund 101-00360 to provide total funding in the amount of $135,513, of which $127,804 shall be capital funds for the purchase of a rescue and recovery sonar image submersible remote operating vehicle, ROV, for the Calaveras County Sheriff's Marine Safety Unit dive team.
Morning, Captain Macedo.
Good morning. At the risk of repeating all of that, I will not. I will tell you that I did bring with me today Sergeant Greg Stark. Sergeant Stark has supervised our dive team for a long period of time. He is here to answer any technically specific questions about the device. I can handle any budgetary or process-related questions. So with that, I'll bring Sergeant Stark up here.
Good morning, Sergeant Stark. How are you? Supervisor Mills.
Yes, first of all, thank you, Department, for including the account numbers in the financial statements. You don't know how important that is, but I'm very glad to see it's been very consistently applied. The questions that I had, and I did bring these as questions to the sheriff as well earlier this week. Can you indicate how many times your department could have used ROV equipment in the past several years? I know it's been low water years and not really a lot of activity, but has there been situations?
Yes, last year we had 6 drowning incidents within the county, and then there were several others with cooperative lakes. I know Amador had at least 3 or 4, and so we would have helped out on those also. It could have been used for those purposes.
You had one drowning at Tulloch? Was that the year before last?
That was the year before last. That was a medical aid that we thought was a drowning, but it turned out to be a medical aid.
So in not having this piece of equipment, the amount of time that you're spending at scene is expanded pretty dramatically?
Correct. Not only the time at scene, but the exposure to the divers. Any amount of time underneath the water exposes divers to decompression sickness or dive-related injury, entanglement. This will allow us to search a larger area much faster and lowering our downtime. Specifically right now, we can only go about 100 feet. This ROV will go much further, up to 500 feet, to recover items and people.
And do neighboring counties have any equipment like this right now? I'm thinking of Tuolumne, Amador, even Stanislaus or San Joaquin.
They have what's called a tow fish or sonar only. This device is unique. It's got a mechanism to actually recover the bodies if it's lower than our lowest depths we can dive.
And have you done any determination on what its life expectancy might be?
We have not. We've talked to the vendor, and it's at least 10 years, depending on how often we use it and maintenance, but it depends on the usage.
Do you feel maintenance costs might be something we need to put in a budget for next year?
I don't. It's going to be minimal, if anything. It'd be gas for the generators, things of that nature. Maybe some additional batteries.
Thank you. Training time?
Training, we have an initial training session with the vendor, and then after that, we'll integrate it into our training with the dive team every other month to stay up to speed.
Is this going to require some type of special certification?
No, sir.
Okay. Those are the only questions that I have at this time, but I appreciate, my only concern would be is that we don't embark on something that we're not going to use a lot, and so it sits in a garage or it sits somewhere. And
Well, specifically last year would be at least 6 times, and it would be a regional asset to our surrounding counties, and it'd be offered to the state for extraordinary circumstances. It can also be used for locating people under the ice, reducing those risks. I know that White Pines freezes over frequently. We would integrate with Evans Pass Fire Department to help coordinate with them. And our lake levels are up, our usage is up. More users means more opportunity, unfortunately, for drowning. So I would foresee that the usage would go up.
okay. Appreciate your time and your responses.
Thank you.
Sergeant, I have a couple of questions. How many people are on a dive team, or dive certified for rescue?
Right now, there's 5 with 3 open positions.
And are we recruiting those 3 open positions right now?
Yeah, we have actively recruited within the department. We're going through a selection process, and we need to get those people once selected through basic dive school.
How many bodies of water do we have in the county?
Comanche, Hogan, Tulloch, various other lakes, Pardee, and we border. We have some high country lakes that we assist with, specifically Spicers, because it takes Tuolumne so long to come over.
And do you experience any cold weather diving in our area?
We consider all diving cold weather. Once you get below the first thermal layer, it can get very cold, up to 50 degrees. And if you're exposed to that for over an hour under the water, or up to an hour under the water, it takes a toll on the diver. Ironically, we would dive at 50-degree water, and then you come up at 110 degrees, so you can have half your team suffering from heat exposure and half your team suffering from cold-related injuries. So this would reduce our exposure greatly.
Okay. Thank you, Sergeant. Appreciate your time. Further questions?
Sergeant Stark. Thank you, Jim. Does this purchase price include all of the equipment that's needed?
Yes. It comes with,
it's attached to a cable, I see, so it must go to a screen and that you monitor and control it and so forth. So all of it's a complete package?
everything. The monitor, the computer, the carrying case, the extra cord, everything's included in the purchase price, including the initial training.
Okay. Thank you.
Inadvertently, yes.
Spear gun?
That was extra.
Any further questions of Sergeant Stark? Madam Clerk, your light's on. Would you like to say something?
I would. So Captain Macedo provided a pamphlet, which I will scan after the meeting, and if any members of the public would like to see it, all they need to do is contact me.
Okay, thank you. I have just one closing comment. If there's no further questions, I am a diver, and I experience some of the things he's speaking about, but not in the capacity of search and rescue and recovery. That's a very highly technical operation, and it's a very dangerous operation. I commend the dive team members and also the Sheriff's Department for providing this service, and I would support the purchase of this equipment.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any public comment?
I just have a question about the mechanism, how long it's been in use, so we know that it has a history of being successful. I mean, is it a brand-new machine that's just created, or has it been around for like 10 years, and we know that it's a old faithful use?
Okay. We can answer that, Sergeant? Or Captain?
I'll let the sergeant address that on the doors.
For the specifics about this model of equipment, I'm not sure. I know the company's been in business for several years. We did have a chance to test and use it up at a conference. We did a research and development, if you will. We drove it and spoke at length to the multiple vendors that were there and chose this one specifically for its durability.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Bonnie? Further public comment? Good morning.
My name is Bob Reeve. I'm a resident of Calaveras County down in Valley Springs. I'm an attorney in private practice that extends into Nevada as well. I have watched with some concern this issue of cannabis for cultivation for commercial gain, because it seems to have attracted elements.
Sir, I'm going to interrupt you for a moment.
Yes.
We're addressing public comment on an individual item on the consent agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Public comment, general public comment has already been completed. It was done at the opening of the regular agenda.
Oh, okay. It's not, so you've already covered that.
We've covered that, sir.
Okay, all right, thanks.
All right, thank you. Further public comment on the agendized item number 9 for the consent agenda? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board. Entertain a motion.
With that, I'll move the item.
Moved by Supervisor Mills. Second. Second by Supervisor Toffenelli. Public comment's been conducted. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed indicate by saying no. Hearing none, motion carries 5-0, unanimous. Thank you, gentlemen. Madam Clerk.
Item 12 on the regular agenda is from the Administrative Office to receive a report from staff, Cal OES, and local organizations regarding the ongoing Butte Fire recovery.
Good morning. We're doing interviews for our OES coordinator this morning, so Mr. Moss is not here. We have a couple people to provide comments. And then before we started that, though, I did want to get some general feedback from the board. We're entering we're just on the cusp of doing some of the road projects, but obviously in terms of reports, the Butte fire activities have wound down enough to the point that if the board would prefer these come in as a quarterly update rather than a monthly update as we've been doing, I'd be happy to make that adjustment. I realize it seems like the month comes really quickly and not a lot changes in that 1 month period.
I would like us to continue a month. I think it's actually a problem that things don't change in that 1 month period, as staff is aware. So I'd like to I think if we push this off, these projects will fall further behind.
And I would see that in a broader perspective of staff providing reports on a monthly basis might also be helpful to the board to understand just exactly what are their accomplishments and what things might be coming up in our radar screen in the future that will require some type of policy discussion. If we just wait for it to happen, so to speak, it's a little different. And I'm noticing in other venues that I go to their meetings, there is continual staff reports at least once a month in a written format that then the boards can ask questions and get clarification on things. I just see that as something that might be an advantage in the future that we can look at.
Okay. Further comments by the board?
I agree with Dennis. I mean, I think if we're going anywhere, I would, if we want to, rather than have less, I'd rather have more. Because I'm having to go back and review videotape and find out, to hold staff accountable for what has been promised in the past. So maybe if we need, I don't think we need to go there yet, but we're looking at the opposite direction than what was suggested, Tim.
Okay. Public comment?
Or public comment first?
On the proposal by CAO for monthly versus
it seems
quarterly.
like there's pretty clear, comments from the board. I don't think.
Okay. That issue's settled then. We're going to continue monthly.
Good morning. Mel Knight, Butte Wildfire Community Liaison. Glad to be able to report to you. Very timely response, and that we're nearing the home stretch on the debris removal related to the structures. I've been reporting in the past and will continue to provide written reports as available from our contractor. Also, by the way, as we're nearing the home stretch, I want to introduce a face for you and the public that you may not see but hear the name all the time, Jeremy Denbo. Jeremy? Jeremy is an insurance specialist for Tetra Tech who has been the primary contact with the community as well as with the insurance companies. He's been quite effective, and I think he's served the county and the public quite well in this role. It's been a pleasure to work with Jeremy. I'm also going to mention a little later that Jeremy will transition shortly as we finish this task into doing a similar activity related to the tree removal project. So we'll be taking advantage of some of the efficiencies there. But I wanted you to see the face and place that with the name, and you probably will still see Jeremy down the hall being available to the public as we wind the structural program down and for the next few months at least be involved in the similar related activities for the tree removal.
It's a pleasure to stand before the board.
Welcome, Jerry. Thank you.
On this, I was going to just give you a very brief report on the two program areas. As I mentioned, the structural program is nearing the end. We expect to probably have all insurance company contacts and payments received in the next 2 weeks. That's a significant milestone that we will have reached. There will be some lingering activities that relate to, I think, some checks coming in, some other activities, but we'll be handling that as there'll still be an office presence for a while related now to the tree program. But to date, there's been more than $5.3 million collected. We expect from insurance company records to be receiving another approximately $600,000 to $1 million as it relates to from what's in the pipeline, and we may find, again, that would probably pretty much wrap this up. We would then be forwarding to the state documentation that shows what's been collected and what were the findings. We'll report those to the state. We'll also report to any outstanding properties the information we will be transmitting to the state, so it does not come as a surprise to anyone if we indicate that this one was not closed for whatever reasons. And we'll be sharing that information before that goes out. But that should be happening in the next few weeks. Christmas week isn't probably an ideal time to probably be sending some of that out. So while we hope to have finished by the end of this year for a number of reasons, we may end up that we'll put some of that to the end of the new year, particularly those that may be the least comfortable of the contacts. But again, I'm very pleased, though, to report that has gone quite well. As I mentioned, we're going to be transitioning the same team. The Tetra Tech team was already under contract to do the duplication of benefit activity for tree removal. And the same team of Jeremy, Donald Kunish, the manager, and I'll be remaining to do some project oversight to make sure that moves as smoothly as this other has. Again, this has gone as smoothly as possible. The tree program is going to be quite different, though, in that we have a much smaller number. There were 159 property owners recently contacted. 27 have already returned information available to us, and we found 6 are insured, which is a slightly smaller ratio, and which we've received 1 payment. Now, the payments will be both smaller and will be proportionately much less. So we'll be trying to provide a scope of that, which is being developed right now. As I receive the scope and some of the plans, we'll be sharing that with your board and county administration as well. Again, the project, again, I'm working very closely with Jeff Krovitz, and I think that hopefully the efficiencies in all the insurance contacts, all the information sharing and whatever, should lead to some efficiencies and effectiveness improvements in the project process. Any questions from the board?
Supervisor Garment.
Excuse me, Mel, I've got that crud that's going around. As always, thank you for your work on this. and I'm glad that we're finally bringing this thing to a close, although I feel like it's the never-ending staircase, and now we've got the trees, so we get to, hopefully we'll learn from this last process. Mel, my question is, as we send this stuff on to the state, has the state given us any indication on where it's going and what their intent is, or is it just going to the black hole?
No, and I doubt that we will receive anything. We'll actually be sending this to CalRecycle, which is the state agency, which will then be dealing with state OES. So we're actually one removed from anyone that would probably do any real follow-up.
Okay.
So we can ask, but one thing we're making it clear is we have no control over what the process is from there. It's our role, again, not to maximize the amount of money extracted from someone, but to see that the obligations, where possible, would help people meet whatever obligations they have. And if it turns out that some are unable to meet those obligations or choose not to meet those, we'll simply be forwarding those on, and we don't really know what the state may do with that.
All right, well, the sooner we get out of this business, I think we'd all agree
Yeah.
better. And I had long conversations at CSAC with our colleagues on the coast, and many of them, they're working with different organizations, and some of them have already signed these agreements, so, you know, we might be the pointing part of the spear, but we're not going to be the end of this.
I think there's been a lot learned here that's been shared. I'm in routine communication with a lot of these other counties. This is now, as Governor Brown just mentioned, the new normal in California is going to be wildfire management as ongoing programs, not projects. CalRecycle has actually contacted me and others about trying to document these so that this isn't a new project every time, but is actually a program. So I think a lot is going to be done. Training's going to be done statewide. We learned so much and have shared so much. The right of entry documents have been revised significantly. The need to do assignment of benefits. When you go to your doctor or dentist for care, they don't send you the payment, and then you have to send the check to the doctor or dentist. Benefits are routinely assigned for insurance payments. Something like that needs to be done, and it is being done on some of these newer fires now. Right. So there's some things like that that are going to make this a little less painful. I will say, though, again, having worked in other counties and the state, it's probably best that it be done, something this community-oriented, be done locally if it has to be done. Because, again, if we didn't have Jeremy here in town, if we didn't have the county staff and others available to assist folks in trying to sort this out, I can only imagine if this had to go to Washington or even to Sacramento, they wouldn't be able to meet with folks. They wouldn't be able to get clear explanations like they are getting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions?
Thank
you very much.
Pleasure to have introduced Jeremy.
Welcome aboard. Good morning, Mr. Krobus.
Good morning, Jeff Krovitz, Public Works. Mr. Denbo's been here for 7 months, 8 months now? Almost a year, so it's not welcome aboard. It's welcome aboard to a new portion of the insurance recovery program, which is the debris removal trees. In discussions with the CAO as we are transitioning recovery operations from Public Works up into Office of Emergency Services, because we are nearing the end of or we're hoping we're nearing some sort of a conclusion point with the tree removal program, that is remaining in Public Works. Transitioning to different management at this late date appears to not make a lot of sense. So I will continue to be your tree removal point of contact. So on that subject, as I expressed last month, there were approximately 20 trees out on Harbor Road that were inadvertently left standing that should have been removed. I'm expecting a date for when those trees are going to be felled and when the debris will be removed. From both Tetra Tech and Phillips and Jordan, as you know, we have to establish debris monitors, environmental monitors for archaeological, cultural, and endangered species before we can fell these trees and remove the debris. Secondarily, once we disassembled the Wallace debris management site, we cannot bring trees to a treatment site that hasn't been cleared by FEMA for NEPA clearance, but we can send that debris directly to the biomass plant in Tuolumne County There is an established contract between County of Calaveras and, thanks, Sharon. Like you, I've still got it. There's an established contract between County of Calaveras and IHI, the operator of the biomass facility in Jamestown, that returns to us about $28 per bone-dry ton of material that's being converted to electrical energy. We don't get to keep that money, of course. We have to forward it back up to the federal government. Otherwise, it would be a duplication of efforts, a duplication of benefit. So, again, that punch list on the 20 trees, as soon as we have our monitors lined up, Phillips and Jordan is ready to go. It's just a matter of getting the monitors coordinated. I expect it to be 1 to 2 days worth of work maximum, and then those will be gone. Concerning the BLM trees inadvertently felled, BLM, of course, has given us permission to haul those trees off and dispose those trees. I have requested that Phillips and Jordan give me a cost for the movement of that debris forward to the county roadway and the loading of that debris and the transport of that debris. Currently, I am attempting to get that debris transported to the Red Hill site so that the logs can be milled and the debris can go into the air curtain burner after we exit our fire season. I've reached out to CAL FIRE. They're amenable to that, but of course we're still heavily involved in the fire season as our new normal, mentioned earlier. And in terms of the balance of the BLM trees, we are attempting to schedule another meeting with BLM to hire a contractor to help them with their federal NEPA clearance for the removal of the trees, and we also have to get cost and determine how that will be paid, because FEMA has made it abundantly clear that trees on another federal agency's land are not reimbursement under the public assistance program, and therefore the cost of those are either coming from BLM or the county or some combination thereof to treat the other additional 400 trees. In terms of the next phase of tree removal, I spoke with FEMA at the end of last week. I spoke with the environmental branch because I'm working with them on these punch list issues. They have not yet received anything from their public assistance branch about the request for reversion for the additional 500 plus 1,500 right-of-way and private property debris removal trees on existing parcels that have already been treated. So I've yet to have a response from FEMA to my reversion request of last June. I am hoping that in the near future we can get a direct meeting, including CAO and ad hoc of the board and Cal OES and FEMA to be able to kind of resolve the delays on this. And then the final portion, as I see it, on the debris removal is the removal of existing private property trees that chose not to participate in the public assistance program that are still threatening public right-of-way. The intent on that, unless I hear otherwise, will be to send letters to the private property owners requesting them to remove the liability as quickly as possible for those remaining. Much of that work is happening already. For those of you who drive up and down Mountain Ranch Road on a regular basis, you'll notice that there's changeable message signs up for December 14th, which I believe is Thursday, for the removal of private property trees that are threatening public right-of-way. That's a private landowner who is doing that, and it is a public works requirement that they pre-post and pre-notify of those intermittent road closures on Thursday. So, any questions on tree removal?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just want to compliment that, going up and, there are a lot less trees out there than there were before. And some of those places, when I drove around checking the other day, were cleaned up. Thank you. There's still a few green tag trees out there, but I know those are more complex. And there's
next phase, unfortunately.
Just a couple dozen of those I found. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Jeff, you'd mentioned coordination with BLM on those other trees. Is this a larger perspective that maybe we should have the congressman involved or somebody from federal agencies other than who we have now?
Potentially, that might be something that needs to occur, but I would like to actually get the lay of the land with members of our Disaster Recovery Ad Hoc Committee, Office of Emergency Services, before we pull the trigger on that type of acceleration.
Okay.
That's my recommendation, at least.
Okay.
Further questions of Ms. Clovis?
On trees, right?
On trees. Well, actually, the emergency Butte fire operations.
Oh.
That's what we're on here.
Okay.
Trees. Did you have another question?
Yeah, I want to know about the project manager for getting the roads redone and how that's wrapping up.
Okay. Would you like to address that, CO Lutz?
I'd happy to address it if you want to discuss where we are at the stage. We did open the RFPs. We had one response, or one responsive bidder. We had a follow-up meeting last week with that bidder to address any potential concerns or questions that we had. I think overall the team, and that was people from Public Works, people from my office, sat down, talked about concerns mostly about making sure that we're maintaining documentation to FEMA standards, and we were very satisfied that this contractor could meet the required documentation. I don't think any of us had any questions per se about the contractor's ability or willingness, so much as could they also meet the federal standards. The people that they brought to the table from the organization were very knowledgeable on FEMA and meeting the reimbursement standards. So I think overall we felt very comfortable with that. So we'd anticipate an actual contract coming to the board then in January.
And they clearly understand that we need to get this work programmed and underway within the next.
Yes. Part of what we were
months.
discussing was just that is, and I don't know if Mr. Krovis wants to talk about some of that, but one of our concerns was just that. How can we make sure that we're doing this timely to meet the reimbursement targets on what is now a very aggressive
Because
timeline?
we've already got a year extension, so
Yes.
aggressive by our making. We need to get going.
Thank you.
I actually have another question, and I sound like a broken record, but where are we with the dig once policy?
All right. I was
You're ready
anticipating
for
the
this.
question. So, as with all things in this day and age, what looks like something simple on the outset is actually a lot more complicated. We've done a lot of research already, and we have found other agencies that have done similar things. For example, Sac City, Sac County, City of Portland, Oregon, City of Los Angeles, Nashville, Tennessee has been one of the more aggressive, believe it or not. In 2002, there was a study done by the American Public Works Association on the impacts of underground utility trench cuts into publicly maintained roads and what the impacts are in terms of the expected useful life and accelerated damage. So many of these government entities have established a multi-pronged approach to what you are asking for. They've developed a policy that essentially makes a finding that the board makes a finding that trench cuts to freshly paved roads are not allowed, and there's a moratorium. And that moratorium varies in entities generally between 3 and 5 years. The board also establishes the ability to establish fees associated with underground utility trenches. So it's almost as if it is a fee for the mitigation of potential damages. The reason I suggested that City of Knoxville, Nashville, Tennessee, had one of the better policies is this 21-page document that establishes the nexus, it establishes fees, it establishes fines, and it also spends a significant amount of time outlining the specifications and conditions under which utility trench repair and mitigation occurs. And so for Public Works, what we need to do is pull out the best parts of the research in terms of policies, produce the drawings and the specifications for repairs, establish the board's ability to set a fee and set penalties, and then go ahead and bring it forward to the board so that we have a policy, we have procedures, and that our ordinance reflects the rulemaking. So our intent is that we will start bringing the first pieces to the board in the early February timeframe for policies, and follow that up with the ordinance in March and April, because we have required procedures for that. It's a minimum of a 2-month period. I would like to meet with you, and I will share with you some of this research so that you will have a knowledge base when we sit down and do it. And if there's another board member that would like to be part of this ad hoc committee, I would welcome that as well, so that we could essentially develop this together in concert with what we think is going to be the best for our county and our situations. The last thing I'd like to say is that the next major capital construction project outside of disaster recovery will be Mountain Ranch Road between Highway 49 and Calaveras. And that project meets the criteria that you have been asking for in terms of a coordinated effort among the public utilities for both communication and power, water districts, lighting, so that we are doing a dig it up once capital project with multiple funding sources to achieve what we are trying to get to. So, and that will be a good example for us to know if we're successful in what we're doing. Finally, I've been working hard for the last couple of months with PG&E on their reconstruction of the streets where they were installing and replacing their gas lines throughout the city of throughout the unincorporated area of San Andreas. And we have essentially sent them back to the drawing board on a number of occasions for not having done a good enough job in terms of the reconstruction of the streets. Polk Street is a very good example of that. Unfortunately, it was accepted by Public Works before we had a chance to get them to come to the table with a better job. And the work that is done up on Market and Broadway on the hill up above at Sunset, we're doing a much better job now in terms of the reconstruction of our streets, and anybody who drives, say, Sunset will see what I'm talking about, comparing Polk Street to Sunset.
Thank you. I know that certainly the PUC has several funds that are available for undergrounding power lines and other things for fire safety and other issues, and so but it has to be done well with our ordinances and our general plan. So it matches. I think Amador County had some success with doing similar projects in the past up in Volcano, as I understand. I don't know the details, but I think that if we take this approach, it'd be good not just for Butte Fire, but always better to coordinate with our utilities and our internet providers and whatnot, so that we could bring better services and protect that infrastructure.
I think that you're probably referring to the Rule 20A monies.
That sounds right.
So, which is another subject, and there was a meeting, was it last week or the week before, we had with 2 board members and the CAO on Rule 20A funds. They're somewhat specific, and they do require the Board of Supervisors to establish a district before that undergrounding is eligible for those funds. And those are actually not grant funds. They are part of the utility fees that are paid by the ratepayers. But if you know of other CPUC
Those
grants...
are the funds I was referring to.
Okay, all right. And just FYI, we are using Rule 28 funds for the undergrounding of the Mountain Ranch Road project, and it's 2 phases. The first phase essentially goes from the creek crossing, San Andreas Creek crossing, Mountain Ranch Road up to Calaveras Road, and the second phase is that creek crossing where the culverts are to 49. Both of those are incorporated into our San Andreas Underground Utility District, PG&E is nearly complete with their undergrounding design and composite trenching for that. I expect that work to come first. The undergrounding work come first, where they'll put in their conduits and their pull boxes, and then we will do the reconstruction of the road, and after the road is reconstructed and open, then we'll do periodic closures so they can be pulling the conductors and then removing the overhead. Okay. So that's going to be the phase on that. That will take some time because, of course, the joint trench has got AT&T in it, Comcast in it, as well as PG&E in it, and there is some potential impact to the CVIN fiber optic, which is also going through that pathway. So I don't think we're going to be opening up that line or tapping into that line, but we also have to avoid touching it.
I understand. And then, as I mentioned last time we spoke about this, when you're ready to go down to FEMA and talk about the standards that we're going to rebuild the roads to, I'd be happy to join. I'm sure they haven't changed their policy yet, but I want to keep pushing on that. We just simply cannot build something that's not to our own standard.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so when you're ready, I'm ready.
Okay. What I'm hoping is that we do have, I believe that there's an ad hoc committee established of yourself and Supervisor Tofinelli, and with the CAO and our Director of Emergency Services, we can get that going. Am I correct on that, CAO Lutz? In terms of a meeting with Cal OES and FEMA?
Absolutely. I mean, I had sent a note to you already on wanting to work on calendar time, so we'll get that scheduled.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Anything else?
Further questions? Supervisor Mills.
Well, I want to go back to this dig once policy, and remember in the FEMA training that we had last year that they said that they would defer their decisions to our policies first, and if we don't have a policy in place, then they're going to ignore it. So if we could bring back to this board some type of a policy, and that if our policy also says that whatever road repairs are done is to bring the road up to county standard, minimum county standard is part of our policy, then that is the direction that we would go from that point going forward. Now, we can't go back and undo what's been done in the previous, but I think that if we're going to protect ourselves into the future, that we just need to establish that as some type of a written desire on the part of this board to do that, and then we'll stop the fight. So I would suggest that we can get together and get some policy put together and bring it back early next year so that we're beginning to be protected for the next events that occur.
So it sounds like there's a potential desire on the part of the board to establish an ad hoc committee for a dig once undergrounding policy development. Is that what I'm hearing? I would defer to the experience of the clerk and council to let us know how that's to be accomplished.
Council? Can we look into that and develop an ad hoc committee for that particular purpose, or can that be developed? I know there's certain rules and regs on ad hoc committees, but to develop policies is the proper way to take this.
And
go ahead,
Mr. Chair. And you may want to consider that, these are things, we are doing our general plan in the next year. They may start to merge, and this could be something we put into the general plan as a policy.
Certainly, if the board wants to create an ad hoc committee, you have the discretion to create yet another ad hoc committee for the specific purpose for a limited time period. I don't necessarily think that would fall within today's discussion for creation of it, but if that's the board's direction, you could certainly direct staff to bring an item back for creation of this type of ad hoc committee.
I think that this time that'd probably be the way to go, to bring it back for another meeting, preferably first meeting or two in January, and look into an agendized item to develop that ad hoc committee and the interfacing with the general plan as Supervisor Garamendi suggested. Supervisor Mills?
Well, I think Supervisor Garamendi had a very important point there, and that is that the general plan needs to be included in this discussion. So if we decide to change a policy, let's be sure that we change the general plan to put the policy as well.
Yeah.
So it all has to meld together here.
If we get lucky, the general plan will supersede our efforts, and we'll get it all done quickly.
You have high hopes.
I would further suggest that the ad hoc committee consider modifications to our local hazard mitigation plan, because that is the document that FEMA first looks at for standards and established behaviors as adopted by the board. So I agree with you that it needs to be in the general plan. I agree with you that there are probably going to be some ordinance and policies that need to be put into place. But I also think that the local hazard mitigation plan is another area that we need to circle into.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Krovitz. Any further, Mr. Krovitz? Any further on this agendized item? Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a 10-minute break right now. We're going to set up for our next presentation. Oh, I'm sorry. Sharon, did you have a comment? I'm sorry. I apologize. We're back in session.
I'm chopped liver today.
You got to stand up and wave.
I'm waving.
No offense.
Okay. Sharon Torrance, Calaveras County Butte Fire Recovery Information Officer. Last time I reported, my report was very brief, but I brought a long report today, so shouldn't take more than an hour or so. This is going to be my last board meeting that I report for Butte Fire Recovery. My last day will be the 31st. So I thought it was appropriate that I kind of reviewed Butte Fire Recovery 2 years later, just from my own perspective. When I first started reporting to you and working with Butte Fire Recovery in September, around the 15th of 2015, I didn't wear glasses. Since then, I have, in the beginning, I had 6 people working with me in the information function. We set up information boards throughout the county because of the lack of communication that's available in the Mountain Ranch and Sheep Ranch and the Butte Fire area. We put on several town hall meetings. We had a very successful open house with over 150 attendees. Since 2015, I've released 243 press releases, I counted. I've worked with other agencies and departments. I've worked closely with Mel and Jeremy and have continued this month to work with their program, putting out press releases, talking to the media. I've done a lot of radio interviews. I actually had Fox 40 come to my house to interview me because they wanted something that day, and as usual, they kind of turned the table to make something that was a positive interview look not bad, but not the way we would want it to turn out. I've had media out with me on site and set up several tours for them, and we've had some good press from Channel 10, Channel 3, Channel 13. I think in lieu of what's happened this year with the fires in the south and in the Santa Rosa area, our event was catastrophic. I think that we're only going to have more significant catastrophic events in the future just because of the weather and the interface. And I think Calaveras County is going to be more prepared the next time, and I'm sure there will be a next time. I've had literally hundreds of phone calls. I'm still getting calls from the public. Just received one this morning from a man questioning the trees that are still standing that were marked. I've been working hard with tree mortality, which isn't part of the Butte Fire, but kind of trails along behind because The fire, from what I understand, the beetles are attracted to whatever is emitted from the burnt trees to the healthy trees or stressed trees and cause that. So I think that one follows another. I just want to thank you for the opportunity to work once again with the county. I've not just enjoyed it, I've loved being a part of what has gone on. I look forward to see the county get better and better. I live in Amador, so I'll be watching you. And still intend on being a part of this process. So thank you again. I'm going to miss everybody. I'm going to miss the job. I really do appreciate the opportunity to serve you here. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon.
Questions?
I just wanted to briefly say thank you for your service in providing a critical function at a critical time, and with your expertise and your background, it just fit very well. And I don't think we could have done as well without you in that spot, bringing sure that the information was correct and timely. And so appreciate what you've been able to do for us in regaining stability.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Now it's time, public comment.
Thank you. Listening to the Public Works Director, I understand that a group of people put together a proposal and presented it, excuse me, presented it to the Calaveras Foundation, and the Calaveras Foundation gave them $50,000. They were asking for a lot more, and I'm curious as to whether the Public Works Director could enlighten us a little bit more. I just heard about this a week or so ago, and they're going to go up, this group of people is going to go onto people's properties and pick up trees that are down. So my curiosity's got the best.
Mr. Fry, is that for the Butte fire or tree mortality?
I don't know which one it is. Maybe the Public Works Director could address that.
I think Supervisor Guerra mentioned.
George, I think you might be referring to the grant given to Central Fire for their tree elf program.
Yeah, that's it.
So that you'd be best to probably talk with Central Fire on that one. That's run through them. It's a great program, though, and a great one to learn about.
Okay, thank you.
Well, in addition to that point is that Central Fire was available to get more, but they wanted to be sure from the foundation that they were capable of performing and they were doing what they wanted done before they. But so there's more money available to them that will be available to them, but they've got to show performance.
Is that
George, you can
Butte
see it on
fire
the tape
or
from
tree
last month.
mortality?
Tree mortality. Tree mortality.
Tree mortality?
Correct.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that later on. Thank you, George. We're going to address tree mortality later on the agenda. We've got to keep those two separate.
Yeah, they asked for more than 50,000.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll discuss that. We'll discuss that on the agenda item this afternoon.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, sir.
I didn't see Public Works.
That's okay. That's all right. Bonnie?
Yes, I just had a question for Jeff, and something he said perked my ears up. He talked about milled wood. Now, I don't know if I've known this or have asked about it, but, you know, I have dementia. Sometimes I forget short term. Do we have a mill in process over there, and what qualifies the wood to be milled, and how come all the wood isn't going over there, and what happens to the milled wood after it's milled?
This is really addressing what's going on at the tree mortality site.
Okay.
So,
Once again, that's a tree mortality issue. It's kind of hard keeping these two entities separate, but we have to, unfortunately. At this time, we're going to take a short break so we can set up for the next presentation. We are going to be going ahead on our agendized items due to the availability of the presenters. We're going to be hearing item 15 next, And we'll hear 13 and 14 after that. 10 minutes, folks. Okay, Madam Clerk.
Item 15 is from the Department of Emergency Services to receive a presentation regarding tree mortality project management.
Will, how are you?
Good. How are y'all today?
Good.
Good. This is Tad Mason. He is with TSS Consulting, our project manager for tree mortality. He's just going to give you a brief overview of the draft implementation plan.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Will Downs, our new emergency operating, our OES director for Calaveras County. Will does attend the meetings of the task force in Sacramento with me, where we were yesterday. Welcome.
Yes, good morning. We are very pleased to be here. Again, I'm Tad Mason, licensed forester and the CEO of TSS Consultants. We are under contract with the county as program manager on the tree mortality program. As of late October, we have a contract in place. Today I'll be reporting on our progress to date, if you will, and what our plans are for the next few months. In your board packet is the PowerPoint presentation. However, the implementation plan did not make it there. I believe you have a hard copy now that's been handed out. We'll be covering that here in a minute. I know we have a hard stop in 6 minutes at 11 a.m. Is that right?
We'll give you a little
Chairman?
leeway on that.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me, just a moment, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Can we get Mr. Moss to please close the door to the chambers, please? Thank you.
Good. With me is my colleague, Dr. Richard Harris. Richard, if you could join me here. Technically, this is the program manager, if you will. I'm the principal in charge, the key interface with the county. However, Richard does the heavy lifting. Come on up, Richard. Okay. So we'll step right through these few slides. Thank you, Sharon. So progress to date. We have drafted up an implementation plan that you have, and we'll be going over that here in a minute. Because of the nature of tree mortality in the county, we are currently conducting drive-by surveys countywide, really, though, focused right now in the Arnold area, and we're making good progress on that. We started in November. One of our foresters you might know, John Ramina, is heading up that project, working directly for Dr. Harris. As far as procuring names and addresses of property owners with candidate trees, we're working closely with Blue Lake Springs, Pete Palford, and Cal-Am Foresters, Pat McGreevy, and that's going quite well. In fact, Richard and the team met with them last week, so that is going well, as I stated. Next step for us, once we have the candidate trees and properties put together, we will send out a right of entry form. We've worked with Will Downs and the Cal OES as well as County Council to put together a right of entry form that's consistent with the county's best interests. Those will go out to the property owners. Hopefully they will sign them and return them, at which point then we can go out and actually measure those trees and put together a project. The first project will be at Blue Lake Springs and on properties southeast of Moran Road. Next slide. All right. Once we have the ROEs back signed, Richard and the team will put their heads together and come up with our first project. Again, likely they're at Blue Lake Springs, at which point then, starting hopefully sooner than later, March or so, we'll conduct those field surveys, depending on weather, to differentiate between trees that are PG&E responsibility and county responsibility. Of course, when in doubt, we like to have PG&E help us wherever possible, and they've been pretty good about selecting the appropriate trees for their removal. So, next slide. All right. End uses. The way we're setting up the projects, the trees that are removed become the property of the contractor that's removing those trees. So they can be sold to the Ampine facility at Martell and go into composite panels, or they could be sold as saw logs to Sierra Pacific at Standard, for example, or even go export. The Port of West Sacramento is fairly active in exporting logs to the Pacific Rim. So that, we think, will absolutely bring down the overall cost of the project by marketing those logs, if you will. We anticipate the first projects to be actually implemented in March, April, if you will, after soliciting bids from qualified licensed timber operators or tree service companies. Once we have those bids back from the tree service companies and the licensed timber operators, will assist the county in review and helping select, hopefully, a preferred contractor, at which point we hope to start mitigating or removing trees in May or so of next year. Next slide. All right. Once the contractor is selected and the trees are starting to be felled, we'll be monitoring those contractors very closely with our licensed foresters, again, working directly under Dr. Harris here. And we'll be coordinating closely, though, with the IT and GIS staff here at the county. Stan Moore has been very helpful for us in our interaction with that team. There's a wealth of knowledge and data there that resides with your GIS team, as you know. In fact, they've just finished programming our iPads, which we'll be using in the field to locate properties where these candidate trees are located. Once the projects are completed, we'll coordinate with Will and the administrative staff to assist with actual invoicing of Cal OES for reimbursement back to the county. We'll also be updating the board here monthly. That was a specific request made by Cal OES and Will and Brian, if you will, as well as generating progress reports monthly. We also intend to work closely with with Sharon. We're in discussions now with Sharon on her securing her assistance after the first of the year to help us with outreach. Dr. Harris is well versed in conducting outreach, having been part of the University of California Extension staff for 2 decades.
Long time.
Long time. Not much hair on that head left, I know. Next slide. Okay, so implementation plan you have in front of you, and we've also handed out to the audience. This is basically detailed steps that we would like to proceed with to implement this project and hopefully facilitate removal and mitigation of 3,000 to 8,000 trees. We're still not sure about the total count, but in the spirit of time, Mr. Chair, I don't know if you want to go through this in detail, but this is basically the plan. Think of it as a roadmap.
I'd like to interject a little bit here on the reason for the plan being presented to you is that we feel that if you adopt the plan by resolution, that provides us with, I guess I would just call it some assurances. And so that's what we would propose to you, is that maybe not at this session, but when you've had a chance to review it and go forward with it, maybe at the next session of the board, that you would actually adopt it by resolution. And in the meantime, between now and then, if you have comments, then we would address those comments at the next meeting.
Yeah, that's going to have to be done in a different session than this one.
Right.
That'll be agendized, and we'll take care of that. I think we're going to need time to look over this plan. As I read this, just a quick glance in your presentation, we're not going to cut down a tree until next June, right?
No, I would say April, May.
April, May?
Yeah.
The turnaround really depends on the right of entry process and when we get those right of entry forms back. And so in the right of entry form that we've developed, we ask for those to be returned within 10 days. Mm-hmm. And then we're working closely with the Blue Lake Springs and Pine Creek HOAs to try to, get the projects moving, right?
Right.
But one of the problems you have with that is that, only I guess about 20% of the people that own the properties there live there. So doing local outreach, a little problematic. We'll be
20% might be stretching.
Yeah. So, but we'll do the best we can to get those right of entry forms turned around and brought back to us. We don't have any problem with winter ops. Winter operations, we have, there'll be provisions for that in our permits with CAL FIRE. So it just, keep your fingers crossed that the right of entry forms come back quickly, and then we can put the project together.
Okay. We'll be watching that.
One way to expedite those right of entry forms from our experience is to conduct workshops locally. So we'll be working closely with Sharon to do that in the Blue Lake Springs area for project number 1. Project number 2, we'll probably expand and go to, say, West Point or Mountain Ranch. We haven't decided yet where project number 2 will be.
Actually, this is where the project manager comes in. Okay, so working with Pete at Elford.
Pete?
Yeah, good old Pete. What we've decided is that we're going to focus to the east of Moran Road, the Blue Lake Springs units there, and then Pine Creek. And then we're going to go west of, the next project will be west of Moran Road. We'll pick up the rest of the Blue Lake Springs units. So we'll be jumping over to West Point to do our drive-by survey pretty quick here.
Right.
But we're going to, our projects are going to be concentrated in the Arnold area initially.
Where is the most devastation, in your opinion? Is it going to be up in Arnold versus West Point?
Where is what?
Where's the worst infestation where we have to have trees removed?
Arnold's pretty hard hit, but a lot of the trees have been removed already because of the SRA grant, because of PG&E. West Point is also another centroid. I mean, the Cal-Am foresters and your own staff, Stan's group, have developed maps that show where the concentrations of mortality are. West Point's certainly one of them. Arnold's another one. So, and then there's various other areas that are kind of scattered around. We've got a map where we've kind of sketched out all the different centroids of mortality, which will be the foci for project areas. We're going to develop that map and refine that map so that Stan's group knows, where we're going next. But that's kind of operationally where we're going next is we're going to stay in the Arnold area to begin with.
I understand winter is coming, so there's not a lot you can do in winter.
Isn't that your district?
Questions of the presenters? Yeah. Supervisor Toffenelli.
Yeah, I have some questions, and I'm not sure where it fits in on this program, but I believe it needs to be addressed. Last Tuesday, we had a presentation by our Public Works Director, Jeff Groves, excuse me, to which he stated that we had some winds the previous weekend, and 17 tree mortality trees fell. We're heading into the winter, and there are my concerns, I'm sure I share them with the members here and the public, that what are we going to do in the interim of this program, and since you're involved in this tree mortality portion of it, is to take care of any trees that fall between now and when a contractor comes on board. How are we going to address those problems? Because if 17 fell the first time we had winds, there's plenty more that's going to fall. And that doesn't even record any in the backcountry that weren't visible at the time. So is any part of this program going to address any of that?
I'd like to comment on that a little bit because we've got experience with that a little bit now. The trees are starting to break up. Some of them have been standing there for 4 years. They're starting to fall across the roads. The trees are on private property. They're not in public right-of-way, so we actually can't go on those properties and remove those trees until we have the right of entry forms returned. If and when a tree falls across the county road, then it becomes the responsibility, of course, of the county to maintain egress and ingress. They have to go out and, cut the tree up or remove it or whatever. Now, who is liable if one of those trees falls on a county road and damages a vehicle? I think that's for your county council to decide. We can't go on the private property and take those trees out unless we have the right of entry form, so we're kind of hamstrung there.
Well, we're going to start the right of entry program here shortly. So some of those trees, we may have a right of entry form signed in the interim before we get a contractor on board. So I understand exactly what you're saying about right of entry. But there's another part of this to which was spoken of earlier about the insurance aspect of it and whether the property owner has insurance or not.
Doesn't cover them.
That doesn't cover them. Okay.
No, it's really kind of strange that people would actually have dead trees on their property that pose a risk to their assets or to others' assets, and they don't realize that they are not covered by their homeowner's insurance because it's a known hazard.
Yes, and I was in an RCRC conference here last week, and what's apparently happening at this point is insurance companies are refusing to renew their insurance and cutting them, and they're finding it very difficult or very, very costly to get insurance, which is part of their mortgage, which requires it. And so they're trying to introduce legislation now that prohibits them from doing that. I don't know how far successful it's going to be since insurance companies are their own entity. But it applies upon some very dangerous aspects here of what possibly could happen, not only falling on a car that's occupied going across a country road, but falling on homes with people asleep at night, killing people. I mean, it's a very drastic thing. I bring it up, but it's very possible it could happen here. And so as we start this program and we get right of entries, is there some way that if that's the case and these trees fall and we have that right of entry, that we can secure some way to go in and get these trees removed?
In an expedited fashion?
Yes.
Well, it's kind of, the question is whether you want to contract on a tree-by-tree basis or you want to contract for projects. So, if, for example, in Tuolumne County, they have actually contracted for the removal of one tree, one hazardous tree, okay? And it would be possible to set up a system like that where you would have contractors that would be pre-qualified, that would be essentially on a work order basis. I mean, that's something to consider. I mean, we could talk to Will about setting it up that way as opposed to the way we've been doing it, which is on a project basis.
And I think that's a conversation that we need to have at the board level and
Yeah.
in the ad hoc committee.
Very relevant thing to try to consider, because then as a right of entry form comes in, you go take action.
My suggestion might be to go down both paths, where if you're contracting for the bulk of those trees, but have something set aside where if we come up with an emergency basis, we know we have the contract in place, and we can then address those one-off trees that pose a imminent threat that we can go in and take out.
Excellent suggestion.
Okay. I think we can discuss that. But that is an issue that needs to be addressed, especially in my district where we did have that happen at the fire station.
And I agree with Supervisor Toffenelli that that would be a nice thing to have. Certainly it would take a little pressure off Public Works. Their road crews are busy as heck all winter and summer and spring and fall anyway. So this would be a nice asset to have. But I like the idea of the projects. I know we've discussed before that you're breaking them into smaller projects so that some of our local companies will have the capacity to take them on.
That's the intent.
Which would be great. I mean, we want to do the right thing by cleaning these up, but it's also good to do well by the community and build our capacity for this type of work.
Let me suggest one other thing here, because this reminds me of a situation, has to do with, storm damage, prioritizing sites, for treatment in terms of storm damage. One thing that we could include in our data collection would be an assessment by the forester as to the imminence of the hazard. Is this tree really, more hazardous than the tree next to it? Is it positioned such that it poses a risk not just to the road but to a structure? I mean, perhaps we can talk about that with, with Stan and his crew as in terms of our data collection, we could actually prioritize the trees in terms of their risk.
If I might, I just want to, before we sign off, I want to compliment you guys on the approach that you're taking, which is a very personal approach. We wanted to go with the local company so we could pick up the phone and call when there's an issue. And you've been very responsive, and you're in the community, so when we talk about a road, you don't have to get out a map. You know what we're talking about. And also want to give a compliment to Stan and the GIS team. I know they're getting recognized statewide for their work, but it's really been outstanding. It's a compliment to all your team, Stan.
Yeah, I share Supervisor Garamendi's comments. CEO Lutz, can we take a look at that issue and discuss that and maybe make modifications where it's necessary?
Are you talking about those small subcontractors?
That's right.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
OES team is here now. They'll be working on it.
Next. Gentlemen, is there anything else?
Pleasure to work with you.
We're going to have fun
Careful,
together.
Careful. We'll be back monthly for updates.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
While we're on the subject of tree mortality, I did want to add to it, because this has been a question of concern, and we've finally gotten enough guidance from the state on the local assistance for tree mortality, or LATM grant, as they're calling it. And basically what that grant does is lets us, as we know, tree mortality is a state disaster, local emergency, so it's not eligible for federal funding. So we have a normal 25% match. What that LATM does is lets us use those funds to offset our 25% local match up to the cap of that. So how the state did it, they identified 10 of the high priority counties or highly impacted counties for tree mortality, of which we're one. The estimate is we have roughly 13% of the state's dead or dying trees within our county, which places us about third highest, with 3 counties ahead of us because 2 are at a tie.
I'm sorry. What is the total amount of those funds?
That's what I was going to say. Then that next thing. So what that means, the formula allocates to us $679,196 specifically identified for us to be used for the 25% match requirement. So that the trick for that, like anything, and so I'm really pleased at the progress that TSS is making, is the state's, this was the state's answer to counties of, we want you invoicing, we want you getting these programs going, is we're giving you an allocation, so we're in a good spot. It's not a race that everybody has to draw down the money first, but they want us to be getting the programs going and actually invoicing against those.
And they're tracking that very closely in Sacramento. Who's using those funds and what the results are. That's the reason I brought up the issues that we need to get on the scorecard. Okay. Any further?
Can I add something a little bit that I just learned yesterday?
Sure.
I just learned yesterday that, the Cali OES reimbursement formula is 75% of your costs, right? Total costs.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but I learned yesterday, and it was real interesting to me, when you calculate the total cost, and you get reimbursed for that 75%. You also get reimbursed for 10% of that 75% as an administrative cost. So, in essence, it's not just 75%, it's 75% plus 10% of the 75%, which further offsets, your local match.
Okay, thank you. We'll take a look at that. I'm sorry, Madam Clerk. Public comment, please.
Yes, I had a question for the tree mortality folks. I understand that the contractors who haul the wood out, that becomes their wood, their lumber. They take it to the mill over there at Red Hill, and that's their lumber. Is there any possibility of local residents obtaining any of this blue wood And can somebody bring some so we could see it sometime? Because I'm really interested in seeing how it turns out.
I think for the process of clarity, when reference was made to the contractor, that's the actual contractor removing the trees, is that correct? It's not TSS, they're the project managers. And that's part of their contractual agreement with TSS and with the county. As far as the blue stained wood issue, that is becoming very popular, I understand, in Sacramento, through our resources that we have with the state governor's task force, and even through our private industry, SPI. I'll try to find out more information, see if I can get you a sample. How's that?
And then a follow-up question, could there be any enticement to the contractors to sell some of the wood on site where it's milled, or to make it available to Calaveras County residents? Because that's our wood.
Oh, I understand, but that's a contractual agreement. I don't know if we'll be able to interfere in that. But I do see your point. That is our wood to an extent, but we got to give it to them if it's under contract.
Yes, but just to be clear, those right of entry forms we'll be sending out to the private property owners. There is a box they can check that says, please leave the timber.
Sure.
Please leave the lot. So if those property, it is private property, if they decide to keep that, we can make that arrangement, in which case they could be made available.
That's something we'll discuss.
Something to think about.
Thank you very much. Any further public comment? Seeing none, I guess we'll adjourn for our closed session. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. We'll be back at
I would say
2:30?
quarter to 2.
Between 2 and 2:30.
2?
Oh, yeah, we're Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for returning after our lunch break on our closed session. Madam Clerk.
Item 2, report of closed session, public employment. Pursuant to Government Code Section 54957B1, Economic Development Director, the Board authorized the CAO to conduct reference checks and extend a conditional offer to the successful candidate pending background check. Upon successful completion of the background, the CAO will announce the name of the successful applicant.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Any public comment? Seeing none, Madam Clerk.
So, returning to our regular agenda, we are on item 13 and from the Administrative Office to establish an ad hoc committee for the Calaveras County Transient Occupancy Tax TOT review and appoint 2 supervisors to said committee.
CEO Lutz.
Yes, this item bringing to the board really in follow-up to a number of discussions that have been had with some of our industry partners and at this board previously on looking at putting an initiative on the ballot to increase the TOT from, or to some level. Basically, Calaveras is at 6% right now, which is the lowest levels in the state. There are other municipalities that have that same level. But there's an opportunity for us to look at potentially increasing that. As we know right now, currently we spend our transient occupancy tax funds on the Sheriff's Department, on the Roads and Bridges program, on our fire districts, and also for the Visitors Bureau. And so those really are trying to address when visitors are coming in, collecting a proportionate amount of usage that they come to provide services for them while they're here. This committee would really help with working with the community, the stakeholders, most notably, of course, the Visitors Bureau, but then other stakeholders within the community to do outreach, to look at how we want to message any increase that we do, and then be able to provide report outs back to the board. The initial thinking is trying to target something for the June 2018 ballot, but again, that would part of that time frame would be this committee working with the industry and get an idea of when is the most successful time, whether it be the June or the November ballot, and how we would message that. So with that, we're requesting 2 supervisors to serve on that committee, and then we can start bringing the people together to have the discussions.
Thank you, CEO Lutz.
I would like to serve on that committee.
One volunteer?
Yeah, just a question, not a volunteer. Tim, what is the average, amongst our other counties, what is their normal TOT rate?
In general, 10% is a pretty common number for a lot of the rural counties similar to ours. A couple are looking at actually going for a measure themselves to go to 12%, but typically in our type of a region, our type of an environment, rarely would you see above 12%. And you're really looking at the, San Francisco, San Diego's, places like that would be higher than that. Yeah.
I think to provide a good balance here, you have one of the districts that does not receive a whole lot of TOT, and the one making the largest contribution of TOT is District 3. So I would nominate Mike as being the alternative. That'll give you a high and a low.
I would accept that nomination.
You're the big income producer, and you don't have a whole lot, so give a good balance.
Comments? Any further volunteers? Supervisor Tofanelli.
I will second.
Okay.
That was a motion. I will second.
Any public comment?
Good afternoon, Chair and board members. George Fry. I hope that the 2 that are selected can educate the innkeepers in this county. I don't know why it didn't pass before. It's ludicrous to me. I mean, I have traveled all over the state, and I've been in San Francisco where it was really very steep. But you really don't look at that even as somebody that's traveling. And it seems like the innkeepers in this county are just really anti that. I don't know who approached CAO Lutz, but I certainly would hope that it would be some strong innkeeper that could be brought on board. And the other thing is there just going to be the 2 board members, or are you going to have public members?
Thank you, Mr. Fry. Mr. DeOro?
Mike, you're volunteering to sit on the committee too, I take it? Since
No,
you got money coming in.
I wasn't trying to become one of your regulars, I'm sorry. But, you know, things change, and then sometimes things just don't change. There was a day when I sat there where you guys are, and we attempted this several times. I think where you have to put your information out is what services the public services give to people coming into our county. And if the sheriff could give some kind of indication what it is, for McAllen Hill Fire, probably 2/3 of the auto accidents, which is one of our major businesses, has to do with out-of-town people. It seems to me what happened before is most people do not like taxes, and this is one of the few times that they have an opportunity to say no. So I think you're going to have to make that thing work for them, but good luck to you.
Well, thank you, sir. Further public comment? There's a motion and a second on the floor to have 2 representatives of the Board of Supervisors sit on this ad hoc committee. It's my understanding that that's Supervisor Clapp and myself, Supervisor Oliveira. Any discussion by the board?
Is there going to be any public members?
Well, let's get the members on the vote on this, and we'll discuss that in a moment. Before we call for the vote, you have comment?
Yeah, one consideration Council and I were discussing for the purposes of developing the ad hoc committee, we'd want to really define out a targeted end date for the committee, and then also the scope or purpose of that committee. And is it cleanest for being in the motion? Is that what you're looking for in terms of the actual scope within that?
Okay, so, Council, we can combine that in this motion and vote, or is that a separate issue?
No, it would be in the same, certainly, it could certainly be in the same motion. And
Then I'd go back to Supervisor Mills. Do you want to amend your motion?
Yeah, I would amend the motion to ensure that the committee works with the public and with the business owners to provide the best discourse or conversation, so that if there is a matter put before the voters on a ballot measure, that there's a clear understanding of who benefits and why. And the defined period of time would be until such, in the course of a year, or until such time as it's placed on the ballot, with the maximum being a year. 1 year.
My second will hold.
All right. Further public comment on the amended motion? Seeing none? Madam Clerk, you have a comment?
Just to clarify, so it's for a maximum of 1 year, or at the time it goes on to a ballot, whichever comes first?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Motion is clear to all members of the board. No further public comment. I'll call for a vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed indicate by saying no. Hearing none, motion passes 5-0, unanimous.
Get another job.
I want this one. You're smiling. Madam Clerk.
Item 14 is from the Administrative Office to establish a pension liability ad hoc committee to review potential pension pre-funding options and appoint 2 supervisors to said committee.
This item also, I feel, is a pressing matter that requires as timely attention as possible. The Finance Committee within the county, which is comprised of myself, the Auditor Controller, Treasurer, Tax Collector, and also the Assessor, had a meeting to kind of discuss some pre-funding options with an organization that's really the largest that does pre-funding options. We have a follow-up meeting that's scheduled in person with that organization in January, but one of the things that we felt is important, one is to have some board members involved in that discussion at the earliest phase, but also I think at a broader level beyond pre-funding is discussing overall our the pension structure within the county, our liabilities, and work to really map out a good plan. The handout that is that the audience has and then was distributed to the board members is unfortunately sobering, but also critical for the consideration for the necessary work that the committee has. And I want to thank the Auditor Controller who pulled a bunch of the revenue information for me yesterday, which saved me a ton of time, so I appreciate that. The 2 graphs on there are really showing 2 different, one's showing percentages, one's showing dollars. It's really mapping the same occurrence, which is 2017-18, what our current PERS contribution rates are at for both our miscellaneous membership and also for our safety membership. And then you can see over the next 5 years the astronomical growth within that rate. This is, an issue that most all counties are facing. Certainly the PERS counties are, with PERS changing the discount rate and also working to recoup the unfunded liability portion of the pensions. So what that translates to, obviously, the percentage, that's the percentage that the contribution is of payroll, which then directly attributes to the next graph, which shows the actual expenditures, where, as we see, our estimated PERS expenditures over the next 5 years more than doubling. As I alluded to in report out, I think last meeting, the PERS board is again looking at their actuarial rates. They're again looking at what they do for that recoup period, a 30-year time horizon versus a 20-year time horizon. All things that will impact this number, likely more to the negative. And so it's incumbent on us then to be developing some plans and having this discussion at an early onset. The second part of that sheet really is trying to show the discretionary revenue growth within the county. And as we all know, over the last 7 years, really, it's been relatively stagnant because of recovery from the Great Recession, then impacts of Butte Fire, very little growth with the exception of 1 or 2 years. On pace with that, though, has been the continual rise in PERS contributions that was before really the impact of unfunded liability. You can see in general, we've seen roughly a 2% average growth rate in PERS over the last 7 years. Contrast that to the graph above, and you can see just what a tsunami this is going to be when it begins to roll out to the county and the county general fund. On average, about 60% of those PERS costs are within the general fund. So what I'm looking for, what we're requesting, is an ad hoc committee be established to be looking at the unfunded pension liabilities, to meet with potential vendors on pre-funding options if we choose to do that. Obviously, bringing that back to the board for additional discussion should we feel that that's the direction to go, but really engage the county's finance committee in a discussion about the pension liability in the county.
Supervisor Garamendi.
The membership of thank you. The membership of the finance committee that currently exists has supervisors on it, correct?
The finance committee itself of the county, it does not have board members on it. It's, like I said, it's the CAO, the auditor controller, treasurer, tax collector, and the assessor.
Okay, I would think of a different committee, but why would we want to have what is the purpose of having it ad hoc versus dealing with it here in the public setting? And why would we do that versus, I mean, we've all got a dog in this fight, so.
There are ultimately, obviously, any recommendation is going to come back to the public, the board. I think the point behind an ad hoc committee is if it involves needing to travel to meet with a vendor, if it involves trying to schedule time with a vendor or a couple vendors to look at possible scenarios, coming back and trying to do some reports, deciding how granular we want to get on some of this information. It just provides a little more speed and flexibility on the initial front end. Obviously, the back end still needs to be discussed.
Is it appropriate to be meeting with vendors before we've decided whether pre-funding is actually a good idea? I mean, it's always a risk to give our money to a private vendor and gamble with public funds.
Well, obviously, we're not giving them money until we have a chance to actually bring them back. Right now, for instance...
But what my point is should we make that decision before we start interviewing people, whether that's something we even want to explore?
Well, actually, that's a good point. I mean, I'd certainly be happy to come back and say, is this something that we would like to? I don't know if that...
Yeah.
Because as you and I have discussed, just a second, as you and I have discussed before, these are retirement funds for all of our employees. And the idea of handing them over for a short period of time to a private fund to try to make an extra buck and take that risk that's associated with it needs to be a big policy discussion that should be done in public.
So the funds that we would be talking about are not retirement funds. They would be funds that the county has set aside, and that it would be a policy direction by the Board of Supervisors on how you want to continue to fund or pre-fund.
But we set these funds aside for CalPERS, right?
We set them aside initially for the 27th payroll and also to smooth PERS rates. So there is over $1 million sitting in a restricted fund for this purpose, because anyone who's been on the supervisor long enough or has watched my discussions with regards to PERS, I have said for many, many years, the bill's coming. The bill is here now. So, unfortunately, we have not made great strides in order to deal with this and address this. And I don't think there's one magic pill here. There's not going to be just pre-funding. We are all in this together, and it's going to take many ideas and many avenues in order to get us all out of this. Pre-funding is an option because right now those funds are sitting in our treasury, and we have a pooled interest rate. We earn 1%. So do we think that we could get better than 1%? Yes. At an extremely conservative investment portfolio? Yes, we could. Those are the options that we're looking at, and those are the things that we at the Finance Committee have discussed and addressed. What can we do with some of these reserve funds that are literally just sitting in our treasury waiting for us to either write a check to CalPERS or find an alternative investment where we can make more money than we're making in the treasury, our current treasury pool, and can use those investments and use those returns in order to offset and kind of stabilize the PERS rates that we're going to be seeing. That's one option, and I did bring it up at the budget hearings that might be an option that we really need to look at. It's called an IRS 115. It's something that I have discussed with this administration. I've discussed it with the former administration, that we have to do something, and we have to start quickly, and it's going to take, we basically have 5 years until we've hit the worst of it, but we have to start making decisions now so we can start inch by inch kind of catching up with it, or maybe getting ahead of it, which I don't think we'll get ahead of it, but at least it won't completely bury us. So that's kind of what we're looking at, is more from a, if we have this money setting aside for the 27th payroll, or that's PERS smoothing, which is what we had done, and that money is accumulated and been earning interest at the pooled rate, why not take those funds and find an alternative source for them where we can earn better than 1%? So that's really been the discussion thus far, and we're looking at, well, what type, so I think that's why we're looking for someone on the board to come and hear the same things that we're hearing, so that you can understand and see the same things that we're seeing, that this is a priority and that something needs to be done. But I think, this ad hoc committee, I think there should be an opportunity to also discuss potential other avenues, because this is not the magic pill. This is not going to cure what's going to happen in 5 years. There has to be a major shift at the department level, at the county, everything has to be considered and everything has to be on the table. The bill's coming. So, when we look at the general fund alone, I think I had estimated it's probably going to be between $4 and $5 million that the general fund's going to have to come up with. We are not seeing that much growth in revenue. So we either start figuring out a way that we can manage this, or it will be figured out for us. We have to, by law, pass a balanced budget. If your revenues do not match your expenditures, then by default you have to cut. And that's what I don't want to see, that control taken away from us and being able to make decisions that are in our best interests. So I think everything has to really be looked at, whether it's TOT, whether it's sales tax, fee studies, compensation packages, benefits, everything. How we're investing these funds in order to make some money that's better than our current treasury pool. So I think it's a broader discussion, but I think this is the start to that discussion. And we don't have a significant amount of time to have the discussion.
If I may.
Go right ahead, sir.
Perhaps we can, instead of doing an ad hoc, out of the public view, we do a study session and actually take on those big issues that you're talking about. Because I agree with you. I think they're very large and we need to plan for them. I'm just concerned about making these kind of big policy choices out of the public view, to be honest.
Can I offer then perhaps, we have the PARS, which is the company that we were talking to, scheduled to come on January 4th. If I can get them instead to come on January 9th and actually do a full presentation to the board, would that be something the board would like to see?
Why would we talk to a vendor before we've made a policy decision that we want to go that direction
This would
at
just
all?
be an information of, this is the program, this is what, it offers, this is the flexibility, and then it allows the board members, each of you, to ask questions of that vendor.
Will we open it up to other vendors?
There really aren't very many vendors at this point. They're the only ones more doing funding of the of other employment benefits like health and dental for your retirees.
It's the OPEB.
Yeah.
They're doing the OPEB.
Our liability in that category is very, very low. It doesn't make any sense for us to pre-fund that. Not as many, but now, PARS has really emerged as the, one that we have history with, long-standing reputation for offering the retirement benefit pre-funding option. So there really aren't a lot of vendors, so to speak, in this field.
And we have a relationship currently with PARS, who handles our alternative retirement plan for our extra hires.
I think my concern is not that, PARS is a vendor that's coming to solicit business from us. They aren't a consultant that's working for us, advising us on what's in our best interest. So I just think we need to keep that in mind. Or if they were our consultant and helping us figure our way forward, that's one thing. My opinion is no. There's 4 other opinions on this board.
Supervisor Mills and Supervisor Clapp next.
Just to confirm, I am on the Debt Advisory Committee and the Investment Committee. So those are two, I'm active in at least investments. GASB 72, and looking at how the trajectory is going to play out going forward, the actuarials is what that is an important piece, and I think that Ms. Callan has a clear understanding of what that is too. LAIF isn't always an option, and I think what we need to do is look at all of the options, put them all on the table. Don't waste the entire staff time, board time, and pulling those together. Let's get them pulled together, and then we can make a complete presentation of the board with just 2 members and staff, and so that at least there's some vetting of a process here. And then we can pull it all out into the public and have a complete discussion. But I think that as we start to dig, we're going to find there's other options out there that we probably had never explored. But we also want to pull it up against an actuarial, because right now our trajectory is going into something that we can't sustain. And if we understand that we're going to have to start making some concessions somewhere along the line as to how we do this in the long term, this is the board that's going to have to start that trajectory going in the other direction. And so the more time we can spend right now thoroughly vetting out all the options and then bring it back to the full board without wasting all of the other time that would be involved, I think it would be very helpful to everyone.
And I think, the issue is we are limited as a government on what we can do. So the IRS 115 is an option. It's a relatively new concept. It's only been around for the last handful of years. And it's taken counties and local entities some time to warm up to that idea for a multitude of reasons. Number one, not many jurisdictions, given the recession, just had money sitting around that they can go and invest somewhere. Okay, so any counties that have opted into this, one of them sold a landfill. One of them, I think they negotiated with their employees to help refund this. Some took. Decided not to, they deferred maintenance. They made active decisions and policy decisions on how they were going to fund this. It really is one of the few ways that we can take funds out of our treasury and not limit them to what is required under government code for investments. Our entire treasury is it's slow and steady. That's what it is. So, we might only make 1%, but we don't lose money. It's there, so it will continue to be there. We don't have very high risk, even medium risk investments for a reason. It's slow and steady. And we're not really looking at doing anything extremely risky, but we do have this one avenue that would allow us better rates of return than our current pool. And outside of that, we have very limited opportunities. It's not like we can go in and negotiate with CalPERS to, could you not, lower the discount rate? That's a board decision that board is going to make. And the reality is, the writing on the wall is they're probably going to go down to a discount rate of probably 6.875 or 6 1/4 or 6 3/4. That directly impacts the county's cost to PERS. When they change the mortality age in their actuary, that negatively impacts us. Every time we do compensation changes here at the county, that impacts our unfunded liability. Every time, every single time we do anything that impacts compensation here at the county, it impacts our unfunded liability and impacts our actuary. And, I think there are certainly some jurisdictions, there's only like 1 or 2 that don't have a massive unfunded liability. Everyone else does. So, don't feel like we have somehow gone awry and everyone else seems to be okay. We're all going to be experiencing the same problem and these same issues. But what I want to make sure is that we are meeting collectively. That's why, we ask that the Finance Committee come together, that we start having these discussions and start making decisions. But I want to make sure you as the board understand we have extremely limited options. This is one option. We've done other things with CalPERS, such as prepaying our lump sum payments, which does save us some money. We have done those types of things to try to help, but that's very minor compared to what we need to plan for the next 5 years.
We know that CalPERS is going to be meeting on the 18th. I had heard discussions about a discount rate of 7%. You hear 6.75 or 7.8.
They're going to tier it, so probably this first one's going to be 7, and then probably a year from there, you're going to see that 6.8.
But based upon your chart here, your compounding rate over 5 years is 28% per year.
Yeah, because what happens is that unfunded liability continues to compound, going up. We have to pay that down. In addition, all of those changes in actuary assumptions that have occurred over the last 3 years all converge, and it's all coming right now.
So let's get back to our item. Are we in a position now to?
Well, I want to comment on Supervisor Garamendi's his comments. I understand. I fully know where you're coming from, but I don't think it's the intention of this ad hoc committee to take anything away from the public. This ad hoc committee is not going to be formed to make any decisions at all, and then come and tell the board this is what we decided to do. The ad hoc committee is to keep at least 2 supervisors in the realm of what's going on in the discussions, and then bring back from that ad hoc committee to the board a presentation on what we've discovered or what we think the best path for this county to be is. And absolutely in no way would it be not vetted in public at all. So, but I understand where you're saying, what you're saying in public monies and investing and so forth. But we, in the investment committee, the Dennis sits on, and I've sat on it as an alternate, we invest county money all the time. This is not anything any different than that. Our reserve funding is being done. And we've experienced a lot of positive going down that road in investment. I don't think we've ever lost any money. The key is making it liquid, so if it starts to go south, you can pull it out and reinvest. It's not locked in. So.
Yeah, and I want to also kind of reiterate what Supervisor Tofanelli is saying. This is kind of no different than when the Debt Advisory Committee meets. We do not make decisions. We discuss everything, and we bring that forward to the board, and you get to make the decision if you want to go down the path that we're recommending or you don't. It's very similar to what we did on the refunding. It was a really good time to refinance our debt. If we had done it, if we had closed a little bit earlier before the presidential election, we would have saved a lot more money. But we still saved money. It's just still hard to remind myself that we could have saved more. But we brought that to the board. We kind of vetted that, had all these discussions with various vendors. We had conference calls. We looked at all of the options, and we brought that forward to the board. We made sure that you had a full presentation. You understood what we were looking at, why we were making those recommendations, and ultimately it's your decision if you want to do it or you don't want to do it. We can't do anything without your blessing. So this is just a way, I think it's important for the board to understand that this is going to be a multifaceted, multi-decision, multi-year changes that are going to have to occur. And we want to make sure that we have people on the board that are kind of in the trenches with us to understand all of the various factors.
Okay. Thank you, Callan. So your recommendations on who would sit on this ad hoc committee would be 2 supervisors,
I thought you were going to ask who my recommendations were. Yes, 2 supervisors.
Okay, and the other members of this ad hoc committee would be who?
Well, obviously, it would work closely with the debt finance, or the finance committee, I should say, of the county. That will really be the primary working group.
Okay. Supervisor Mills, got a comment?
Well, I was just going to ask Rebecca, if you know what the current LAIF rate is? I know it's probably your most liquid account that you can work with. But it doesn't really give you a whole big return. I mean,
No.
it's
So,
ridiculous. It's like
no.
1.75 the last I saw.
Yeah.
It's like, what is that?
Yeah, so we're looking at, different options where, maybe we could earn 3% or maybe we could earn 4%, but not risky. It's just going to be a better portfolio than what we're currently doing. There is, of course, a risk to doing that because, maybe you don't make 4%, maybe you make 1%. That is a risk. But we're also risking the fact that we're only making pool interest right now. That's it. So I think, it's looking at the portfolio, it's looking at the historical trends, it's looking at what's coming down the pike, it's considering all of that. I don't see that any different than what the Deferred Compensation Committee is doing right now, any different than what the investment, the Treasury Oversight Committee is looking at, being aware of what's out there, being aware of what risk we're entertaining and what the consequences or the benefits of those are going to be.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Callen. I'd entertain a motion on this item. Well, any suggestions, nominations?
Can't nominate ourselves.
Well,
But I would volunteer.
I would nominate Supervisor Mills.
And I would nominate Supervisor Tofinelli.
Okay, we have 2 nominations, Supervisor Mills and Supervisor Tofinelli. Any further nominations?
For what period of time?
Nominations closed.
What period of time? What period of time?
What period of time in?
Purpose.
According to this, would be 1 year, December 31st, 2018. It does say that.
Okay, 1 year. Council, that meet the format of our motion to be entertained here? Time limit and two candidate nominations?
Yes, in order for an ad hoc committee to be temporary in nature and to be essentially treated differently under the Brown Act, it has to be comprised solely of board members not constituting a quorum. It has to, in creating the committee, you have to define the purpose, the time frame in which to accomplish the purpose, and it has to be advisory in nature. So those are kind of the parameters that you need to work with making a motion.
Having clarity from county council, I would entertain a motion.
Well, I would move that we would establish a pension liability ad hoc committee to review potential pension pre-funding options. And that Supervisor Mills and myself sit on that for a period of to not exceed 1 year.
Okay. Any second?
I'll second that.
Second by Supervisor Clapp. Public comment.
The Mark Twain Healthcare District has funding from the county of somewhere between $800,000 and $900,000 a year, depending upon the tax rolls. That healthcare district, you might want to check with Dr. Randy Smart, but I know that they did some investing with Umpqua Bank. I don't remember at this point what the percentage was, but it's a local bank here, and the Mark Twain Healthcare District has worked with that person for several years now. So I just wanted to give you some input.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fry. Further public comment? Mr. DeRoro?
My only comment would be that I think when you bring this back to the board, first you should go through and make a very good, complete presentation so that the public understands what's happening with the PERS system. Because, you know, there's two steps here. One is how you're going to address it, but actually what is it you need to address? Because...
Thank you. Any further public comment? Seeing none, bring it back to the board for a vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed indicate by saying no. Hearing none, motion carries 5-0 unanimous. Madam Clerk.
Item 16 is from AB 109 to approve fiscal year 2017-18 CCP implementation plan with budget adjustment pursuant to section 1230.1C of the Penal Code. The plan shall be deemed accepted by the BOS unless rejected by a 4/5 vote.
Good afternoon, Mr. Leach.
Good
How are you?
afternoon. Long time no see. So I'll be very, very brief today. Most of what's in this Community Corrections Partnership spending plan, really all of it except for one item, is exactly what was included in final budget already. So, I mean, you guys have already seen and approved this spending plan with one exception that was discussed at the last CCP meeting and approved unanimously by the CCP members. So now I'm bringing this plan back to you to be finalized, along with a narrative version of everything that was funded, but with also the one proposed spending change. So that one change is the recommendation that the day reporting center, which is now in temporary trailers, would be moving to the Colombo building, which is where the probation department is now. That would have the ag department moving elsewhere, and us being the day reporting center taking over the ag side of the building. In reality, what will happen is the ag side will become the juvenile probation department, so we'll split the juvenile side off, which really is what should have always happened. Juveniles are supposed to be sight and sound separate. They should have a separate entrance. You shouldn't have juvenile probationers and their family members mingling with adults in the same lobby. So it really helps us out in a lot of ways. Also helps with some Department of Justice compliance issues that we're looking at as far as sharing buildings with other agencies that are not law enforcement. And frankly, the biggest benefit to the probation department is from a staffing coverage standpoint. You know, a lot of times we're trying to find two people to transport or a male to drug test an offender and these kind of things. And having us all together under the same roof will be really, really helpful. So that's part of why it was made. Also, you know, fiscally what this does is that portion of the building that would be picked up by AB 109 would be state funds instead of county funds, or however ag is split now. So with that, I know that's a real brief overview, but I'll just stop and answer any questions that the board has.
Any questions of Mr. Leach by the board? Seeing none, any public comment? Seeing no public comment, we'll bring it back. Entertain a motion.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Moved by Supervisor Tofinelli.
Second.
Second by Supervisor Garamendi. Public comment has been addressed. Call for a vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed indicate by saying no. Hearing none, motion carries 5-0 unanimous. Madam Clerk.
Item 17 is from the Planning Department to approve 2017-099 General Plan Amendment from Public Service to Commercial on APN 018-007-043.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How are you doing?
I'm just fine, thank you. So much like everything else we do in planning, we're a little bit complicated. One project, two different actions. We have before you an application from Ms. Dixie Lee Adams for a general plan amendment and a zoning amendment. She has purchased the old McCalmy Hill Fire Station on Main Street in McCalmy Hill. And her intentions are to actually operate a retail business and a beer and wine bar from that location. Problem being is that the property is currently zoned PS, which was appropriate for the McCalmy Hill Fire Station, but is not so appropriate for the intended use. So she has made an application to us to amend the zoning to commercial, specifically C2. But before we can adopt the C2 zoning, we also have to amend the land use designation. Currently, it is also public service, which does not allow commercial zoning. So to be consistent with the commercial district and for the purpose of zoning the property, we will need to also approve a general plan amendment from the current public service designation to commercial. With that, we did go before the Planning Commission, took everything into consideration, including public comment, for which Ms. Adams did have several members of the McCalmy Hill community that stood up in support of her request to C2. And the Planning Commission's recommendation to you is to adopt the general plan amendment from the current public service designation to commercial, which was item 17, and then the following item on the agenda, 18, would be addressing the zoning amendment itself from the current public service or PS zone to C2, general commercial.
Any questions of staff? Dory? Okay. Seeing none, any public comment? Seeing no public comment, we'll bring it back for a vote, or actually a motion, I'm sorry. Entertain a motion?
I'd like, thank you very much, Clyde. I'd like to, can I do them both at the same time?
Yeah.
No?
No.
On item number 17, I'd like to make a motion to approve the item 17. I won't read it all out.
That's the general plan amendment.
General plan amendment.
I would second that.
Second by, actually, motion by Supervisor Garamendi, seconded by Supervisor Clapp. Public comment's been addressed. I'll bring it back to the board for a vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed indicate by saying no. Motion carries 5-0, unanimous. Item 17, Madam Clerk.
Item 18 is from the Planning Department to approve 2017-099 zoning amendment from PS PD, Public Service Plan Development, to C2 PD, General Commercial Plan Development on APN 018-007-043.
Again, your Planning Commission has considered this and has recommended that you adopt the C2 zoning. So that would be a zoning amendment from the current PS Public Service Zone to C2 General Commercial.
Any public comment on item 18? Any questions of staff? Hearing none? I'm sorry, Mr. Fry?
Oh, excuse me. The plan development has to be applied. You are correct, thank you. We have a tendency to kind of forget that these days just because we're kind of in the works of doing away with the PD. But yes, that would be from PS PD to C2 PD, which, as you probably already know, is the signifier for the plan development permit, just to basically make findings of consistency for new construction in the historic district of McCalmy Hill to be compatible or compliant with the adopted McCalmy Hill design guidelines.
Any questions of staff? Any public comment after that clarification? Bring it back. I'm sorry.
I'm just wondering what they intend to do commercially there. I didn't catch it.
Ma'am, you'll have to speak into the microphone.
I didn't catch what they said they intend to do with that commercial, this last commercial idea.
What's the, if I understand it correctly, what's the intent of the change? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Okay.
I know the old fire station.
Right.
Is this adjacent to that old fire station?
I'll let planning answer that.
So the property in question is the old fire station. It is adjacent to the town hall, just across the street from the hotel. And currently, the parcel is zoned appropriately. Well, it used to be zoned appropriately because it used to be the home of the firehouse, the fire district's fire station, and it's currently zoned public service, which does not allow commercial uses such as the proposed use, which is a wine and beer bar within the building, in addition to a retail establishment. So none of that is permitted in the public service zone, and the owner wishes to, commence a new business, start up a new business, and she can't do that in the current zoning. So the only difference is, as Mr. Fry explained or reminded me, is that the PD is a combining zone, which currently is in place to ensure that any new development or any new construction of any parcels within the historic district are compatible or found compliant with the current guidelines, design guidelines that are adopted through your community plan.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. Lord.
Make a motion.
Supervisor Garamendi.
I'm sorry, Supervisor Cuffman.
This is Supervisor Garamendi's District 2, and I'd like to hear from him before I decide.
No, gentlemen, I'm trying to take the approach that less is more. This is actually a great addition to the community. Many of you know, if you've been down to downtown Moke Hill, it is a building that is not being utilized well since the fire department moved over to the Mike DeLordo Fire Station. But it fits very nicely with the community, and there's a lot of community input that's gone into it. Miss Adams has excellent taste and runs a great retail establishment right next door. Dixie's Feather Your Nest, if you guys are still shopping for your Christmas gifts. I encourage you all to come to, as I mentioned, I'm part of the Chamber of Commerce. Come to Moke Hill and do your shopping. But this has got a lot of community support, and I know Dixie's going to do a really nice job, and it's part of the real activity that's happening on Main Street. So I'm glad she's got the courage to take this on, and I wish her the best, and I think the county should move ahead with this and let this woman get to business. And my motion is to approve the zoning amendment from PSPD to C2PD, General Commercial Plan Development, for this site.
Motion on the floor, second?
I would second that.
Motion by Supervisor Garamendi, seconded by Supervisor Clapp. Any further public comment? Seeing none, I'll bring it back for a call for the vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed indicate by saying no. Motion carries 5-0, unanimous. We'll expect an invitation to the grand opening.
Can I shake your hands?
Oh, you can use the microphone right there and.
Okay, it's been a long, I've been green about this whole thing. I just want to thank you all for giving me this opportunity, and come on in and have a beer or a glass of wine.
Okay, thank you. Madam Clerk.
Supervisor announcements. In compliance with AB 1234, chaptered as Government Code Section 53232.3D, board members shall provide brief reports on meetings they attended at the expense of the local agency at the next regular meeting of the legislative body. This report is required to include meetings attended for which there has been expense reimbursement, mileage, meals, lodging, etc., but may also, at the board member's discretion, include any other meeting attended by the supervisor on behalf of the county.
Okay. Who would like to go first on the board? Supervisor Clapp, we'll go for down. Your light's on, sir.
Anyway, I attended Area 12 last week, and you guys got a bargain because it was in our county, and it didn't cost you a dime.
Okay. Supervisor Mills.
very quiet this past week since the last meeting, so Merry Christmas to that.
All right, Supervisor Toffenelli.
Sure. I attended an RCRC meeting in Sacramento as the alternate for Supervisor Garamendi, and as I spoke earlier about tree mortality, it was a topic that was spoke about there, especially the concerns about the insurance companies dropping homeowners and not letting them renew their policies. That's coming up. January usually is the beginning of the year for policies for homeowners, so it's a grave concern. Also the concern of the trees and the length of time they've been dead and the number of trees that are falling. And we experienced several here and falling across power lines. The concerns there were them falling over power lines. Luckily, the ones that fell here were local. We were able to see them. The concerns are the ones that are out and way out and not generally seen, and the concerns of fires associated with that, and actually trying to get some litigation on the floor to address these issues. And I also attended a COG meeting, to which I'm happy to report a couple items from that meeting last Wednesday night. The COG, through efforts of the CAO and myself and Public Works, put forth some applications, and the one application for Valley Springs Elementary School grant has been tried to push through several times. It was announced last Wednesday by Caltrans. It has been funded this time. So we have a planning and engineering grant money coming available for that in January. Also, a grant we put in for Polk Street, and that was funded also by Caltrans. Okay. So beginning of the year, we should have funds available, send out RFPs to get quotes for the planning and engineering part of that, those aspects of those jobs. And once that's accomplished and we get those in hand, we will have what's called a shovel-ready project, and it will be giving us opportunities for funding to put those projects on the ground and in construction phase. Also at that meeting, during Caltrans' presentation to the COG board, they announced that starting in 2018, for the next 4 years, through basically what they call their SHOP program, and money was allocated through SB1 for it. They will spend about $42 million in Calaveras County over that four-year period. And there's a list of projects that was given to us, a draft, and I passed those on to the CAO so he can pass those on and post them. And I will send a copy down to Diane so she can post those. And it's very positive. Caltrans is very happy with what's happening here in Calaveras County. And I want to thank Carl for his help in pushing those projects through, especially the grants and these projects here that are coming towards Calaveras County. And
thank you, Supervisor. Supervisor Garamendi.
That's always a good report when you're bringing home money. We could always report that. We did have I didn't have any meetings I was charging the county for this week, although I did drive to all the way over to the Days Inn in Jackson, but that's not very far of the county line. The Sierra Nevada Conservancy, we hosted them here in Calaveras last week, and thank you, Gary, for covering at RCRC. But we hosted them. We took them up through the Butte Fire Scar, as well as saw some fire breaks that we're working on up in West Point area. We had a limited amount of time for a field trip, but we had really good turnout from the Forest Service as well as many state agencies. Wanted to come up and see what was going on. We had a meeting that evening. We had a reception that I hosted at the Leger Hotel. And we were greeted by our Secretary of Natural Resources, John Laird, who came up, which was great. The point of having everybody up was to really, Sierra Nevada Conservancy has been a big funder of a lot of projects in our communities. especially up country over the last decade. So, when we look at the park bonds and things that are going forward, there's big carve-outs within the park bonds. So really having a partner like Sierra Nevada Conservancy who understands our county, our needs, especially around things like healthy forests, is a real advantage to us. So I was very grateful that I got to serve this last year on their board. Unfortunately, our term is up. The ball passes to Tuolumne County for the next 2-year term, but we just need to remember that we've got some really good friends, and we've been able to establish some good contacts down in Sacramento and across the foothills through this organization. We also hosted a tribal forum to talk about some of their issues that local tribes have, which is an important thing to keep in mind and have a great importance to both our community and the Sierra Nevada Conservancy. And then, of course, on Sunday was Moke Hill Open House. So a good time had by all. Mr. Tofanelli has promised next year to come and do some of his Christmas shopping in Calaveras, Moke Hill, which is greatly appreciated. That's my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Supervisor Garamendi. On the 6th, I attended the Agenda Review Committee meeting for today's meeting. Also, I had contact with Paul DiBarlo of our Continuing Technical Education Program. If you'll remember, that's the program that, the board approved and had sponsored, which I'm representing the county on. We are going to be issuing a press release with school districts advising a job fair day or introduction day. That's going to be held sometime, I believe, in January, the latter 2 weeks. We attended the law library meeting. As you may or may not know, the committee is required by law through the state, and it's under the jurisdiction of the sitting Superior Court judge in the county, which is Judge Healy. Some very important issues were discussed, and one of them was to digitize and bring up our law library to the digital world. You may not know that we have hard copy libraries right here in this building, and that transition was decided at that committee to do that and move the location to the San Andreas Library. This is something that's going to kind of bring us up in the 20th century, actually 21st century, although it will relieve us of some very hard labor duties of maintaining the hard copies of law books. As you well know, or you may not know, that most jurisdictions are going to digital law libraries using various records, so that's another improvement we're making on that.
And when you say out into the 21st century, just the location of the law library in the dungeon below our chambers here is an indication of bringing it up to the 21st century.
That's absolutely true. I think we had to cross a moat to get into there. But no, seriously, that's going to make things a lot easier. That'll be an ADA compliant facility over our new library, and with the addition of electronically, it's accessing the laws and forms and things of that sort required for criminal justice systems or civil systems. It's going to help us quite a bit. I did attend the COG meeting, not as a representative, but as a spectator, and I was very proud of the results of that with our representatives and our board members, Supervisor Mills, Supervisor Tofanelli, and our commissioner from District 3, Commissioner Tim Muries. I see the COG making great strides now. I was particularly impressed by the funding. $42 million just for Calaveras County. That's huge. I'm glad to say that on that list of projects is a project in District 3. I don't know if that start date's going to be set that close, but it's going to be a major project on Pennsylvania Avenue, or actually Pennsylvania Gulch Road on Highway 4 all the way to Tom Bell Road. And they're going to be putting a left-hand turn lane. Is that correct?
I believe there's projects in all 5 districts.
Good.
It's my understanding that there will be at least one project in all 5 districts. And it possibility, when I had a discussion with him about extending a turn lane from Vista del Lago west to a turn-in lane Yeah, where the first, yes. Where
Yeah,
the
that-
collision that occurred after the signalization was turned on.
On the 7th, I attended the Murphy's Business Association meeting. They had a very successful Christmas parade and open house. And that is one of our model organizations, I must say. I'm very, very impressed with the progress they've made, and also the Murphy's Community Club. District 3 is benefiting greatly from that operation, and Murphy's itself and our wine and tourist industry. I hope to see that continue, and we'll be doing all we can to support that, along on a county-wide basis also, with our Visitors Bureau and with Chambers. I also attended a meeting with one of our volunteers from our Sheriff's Department in the Murphy's area regarding a Neighborhood Watch program. As you may or may or not know, we have a new staff person in charge of our Neighborhood Watch due to promotions and transfers with the Sheriff's Department. And I believe it's Sergeant Whiting now is in charge of that. And I would encourage everybody, especially the folks viewing us on closed-circuit TV and also on our public access, if you don't have an established Neighborhood Watch party or Neighborhood Watch organization, now's the time to start one. I've seen some very successful organizations, and I've seen some folks that probably need a little help. You can contact our Sheriff's Department, contact Sergeant Whiting to get started on that. Those are things that are needed. More eyes out there will prevent crime from occurring and will solve crimes that are occurring. So if you'll take that in consideration, I'll be a happy camper. That's all I have to report. Staff, any reports? No report from staff. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending. I'm sorry. Mr. Fry, you had a comment.
Yes, I have a point of order.
I'm dying to hear it.
I asked you about the item number 13, that whether you were going to have any public members, and you said that you would address that later. I didn't know whether.
Yeah, my intention was to address it later when we decide how we're going to form the committee and who's going to sit on it. But I will take your suggestion in consideration when that time comes. Okay, thank you. All right. Any further? Meeting adjourned.